Start recording. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the December webinar of the JFK Peace Speech Committee. My name is Martin Schatz and I'm a coordinator for the committee. We're delighted to have Kathy Kelly with us this evening. And as is our custom, we'll begin by showing President Kennedy's American University commencement address. This will be followed by Kathy's commentary and then a question and answer between her and the audience. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat or use the raise hand icon during the Q&A so we know you want to be recognized to ask a question. Without further delay, let's turn to President Kennedy's speech. And please be muted so it doesn't interfere with the speech.
President Anderson, members of the faculty, Board of Trustees, distinguished guests, my old colleague, Senator Bob Byrd, who has earned his degree through many years of attending Knight Law School, while I am earning mine in the next 30 minutes, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pride that I participate in this ceremony of the American University, sponsored by the Methodist Church, founded by Bishop John Fletcher Hurst, and first opened by President Woodrow Wilson in 1914. This is a young and growing university, but it has already fulfilled Bishop Hurst's enlightened hope for the study of history and public affairs in a city devoted to the making of history and to the conduct of the public's business. By sponsoring this institution of higher learning for all who wish to learn, whatever their color or their creed, the Methodists of this area and the nation deserve the nation's thanks. And I commend all those who are today graduating. Professor Woodrow Wilson once said that every man sent out from a university should be a man of his nation as well as a man of his time. And I'm confident that the men and women who carry the honor of graduating from this institution will continue to give from their lives, from their talents, a high measure of public service and public support. There are few earthly things more beautiful than a university, wrote John Masefield in his tribute to English universities, and his words are equally true today. He did not refer to towers or to campuses. He admired the splendid beauty of a university because it was, he said, a place where those who hate ignorance may strive to know, where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see. I have therefore chosen this time and place to discuss a topic on which ignorance too often abounds and the truth too rarely perceived, and that is the most important topic on earth, peace. What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war, not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time. I speak of peace because of the new face of war. Total war makes no sense in an age where great powers can maintain large and relatively invulnerable nuclear forces and refuse to surrender without resort to those forces. It makes no sense in an age where a single nuclear weapon contains almost 10 times the explosive force delivered by all the Allied air forces in the Second World War. It makes no sense in an age when the deadly poisons produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the globe and to generations yet unborn. Today, the expenditure of billions of dollars every year on weapons acquired for the purpose of making sure we never need them is essential to the keeping of peace. But surely the acquisition of such idle stockpiles, which can only destroy and never create, is not the only, much less the most efficient, means of assuring peace. I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary, rational end of rational men. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuers fall on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent task. Some say that it is useless to speak of peace or world law or world disarmament, and that it will be useless until the leaders of the Soviet Union adopt a more enlightened attitude. I hope they do. I believe we can help them do it. But I also believe that we must re-examine our own attitudes as individuals and as a nation, for our attitude is as essential as theirs. And every graduate of this school, every thoughtful citizen who despairs of war and wishes to bring peace should begin by looking inward, by examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War, and towards freedom and peace here at home. First, examine our attitude towards peace itself. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made. Therefore, they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe they can do it again. I am not referring to the absolute, infinite concept of universal peace and goodwill, of which some fantasies and fanatics dream. I do not deny the value of hopes and dreams, but we merely invite discouragement and incredulity by making that our only and immediate goal. Let us focus instead on a more practical, more attainable peace, based not on a sudden revolution in human nature, but on a gradual evolution in human institutions, on a series of concrete actions and effective agreements which are in the interests of all concerned. There is no single simple key to this peace, no grand or magic formula to be adopted by one or two powers. Genuine peace must be the product of many nations, the sum of many acts. It must be dynamic, not static, changing to meet the challenge of each new generation. For peace is a process, a way of solving problems. With such a peace, there will still be quarrels and conflicting interests, as there are within families and nations. World peace, like community peace, does not require that each man love his neighbor. It requires only that they live together in mutual tolerance, submitting their disputes to a just and peaceful settlement. And history teaches us that enmities between nations, as between individuals, do not last forever. However fixed our likes and dislikes may seem, the tide of time and events will often bring surprising changes in the relations between nations and neighbors. So let us persevere. Peace need not be impractical. and war need not be inevitable. By defining our goal more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we can help all people to see it, to draw hope from it, and to move irresistibly towards it. And second, let us re-examine our attitude towards the Soviet Union. It is discouraging to think that their leaders may actually believe what their propagandists write. It is discouraging to read a recent authoritative Soviet text on military strategy and find on page after page wholly baseless and incredible claims, such as the allegation that American imperialist circles are preparing to unleash different types of war, that there is a very real threat of a preventative war being unleashed by American imperialists against the Soviet Union, and that the political aims, and I quote, of the American imperialists are to enslave economically and politically the European and other capitalist countries and to achieve world domination by means of aggressive war, unquote. Truly, as it was written long ago, the wicked flee when no man pursueth. Yet it is sad to read these Soviet statements, to realize the extent of the gulf between us. But it is also a warning to the American people not to fall into the same trap as the Soviets, not to see only a distorted and desperate view of the other side, not to see conflict as inevitable, accommodation as impossible, and communication as nothing more than an exchange of threats. No government or social system is so evil that its people must be considered as lacking in virtue. As Americans, we find communism profoundly repugnant as a negation of personal freedom and dignity. But we can still hail the Russian people for their many achievements in science and space, in economic and industrial growth, in culture, in acts of courage. Among the many traits the peoples of our two countries have in common, none is stronger than our mutual abhorrence of war. Almost unique among the major world powers, we have never been at war with each other. And no nation in the history of battle ever suffered more than the Soviet Union in the Second World War. At least 20 million lost their lives. Countless millions of homes and families were burned or sacked. A third of the nation's territory, including 2/3 of its industrial base, was turned into a wasteland, a loss equivalent to the destruction of this country east of Chicago. Today, should total war ever break out again, no matter how, our two countries will be the primary target. It is an ironic but accurate fact that the two strongest powers are the two in the most danger of devastation. All we have built, all we have worked for, would be destroyed in the first 24 hours. And even in the Cold War, which brings burdens and dangers to so many countries, including this nation's closest allies, our two countries bear the heaviest burdens. For we are both devoting massive sums of money to weapons that could be better devoted to combat ignorance, poverty, and disease. We are both caught up in a vicious and dangerous cycle, with suspicion on one side breeding suspicion on the other, and new weapons begetting counter-weapons. In short, both the United States and its allies, and the Soviet Union and its allies, have a mutually deep interest in a just and genuine peace and in holding the arms race. Agreements to this end are in the interests of the Soviet Union as well as ours. And even the most hostile nations can be relied upon to accept and keep those treaty obligations, and only those treaty obligations, which are in their own interest. So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal. Third, let us re-examine our attitude towards the Cold War, remembering we're not engaged in a debate, seeking to pile up debating points. We are not here distributing blame or pointing the finger of judgment. We must deal with the world as it is, and not as it might have been had the history of the last 18 years been different. We must therefore persevere in the search for peace, in the hope that constructive changes within the communist bloc might bring within reach solutions which now seem beyond us. We must conduct our affairs in such a way that it becomes in the communist interest to agree on a genuine peace, and above all, while defending our own vital interests, nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either a humiliating retreat or a nuclear war. To adopt that kind of course in the nuclear age would be evidence only of the bankruptcy of our policy or of a collective death wish for the world. To secure these ends, America's weapons are non-provocative, carefully controlled, designed to deter, and capable of selective use. Our military forces are committed to peace and disciplined in self-restraint. Our diplomats are instructed to avoid unnecessary irritants and purely rhetorical hostility, for we can seek a relaxation of tensions without relaxing our guard. And for our part, we do not need to use threats to prove we are resolute. We do not need to jam foreign broadcasts out of fear our faith will be eroded. We are unwilling to impose our system on any unwilling people, but we are willing and able to engage in peaceful competition with any people on earth. Meanwhile, we seek to strengthen the United Nations, to help solve its financial problems, to make it a more effective instrument for peace, to develop it into a genuine world security system, a system capable of resolving disputes on the basis of law, of ensuring the security of the large and the small, and of creating conditions under which arms can finally be abolished. At the same time, we seek to keep peace inside the non-communist world, where many nations, all of them our friends, are divided over issues which weaken Western unity, which invite communist intervention, or which threaten to erupt into war. Our efforts in West New Guinea, in the Congo, in the Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent have been persistent and patient, despite criticism from both sides. We have also tried to set an example for others by seeking to adjust small but significant differences with our own closest neighbors in Mexico and Canada. Speaking of other nations, I wish to make one point clear. We are bound to many nations by alliances. These alliances exist because our concern and theirs substantially overlap. Our commitment to defend Western Europe and West Berlin, for example, stands undiminished because of the identity of our vital interests. The United States will make no deal with the Soviet Union at the expense of other nations and other peoples, not merely because they are our partners, but also because their interests and ours converge. Our interests converge, however, not only in defending the frontiers of freedom, but in pursuing the paths of peace. It is our hope and the purpose of Allied policy to convince the Soviet Union that she too should let each nation choose its own future, so long as that choice does not interfere with the choices of others. The communists' drive to impose their political and economic system on others is the primary cause of world tension today. For there can be no doubt that if all nations could refrain from interfering in the self-determination of others, the peace would be much more assured. This will require a new effort to achieve world law, a new context for world discussions. It will require increased understanding between the Soviets and ourselves. An increased understanding will require increased contact and communication. One step in this direction is the proposed arrangement for a direct line between Moscow and Washington to avoid on each side the dangerous delays, misunderstandings, and misreadings of others' actions which might occur at a time of crisis. We have also been talking in Geneva about our first step measures of arms controls, designed to limit the intensity of the arms race and reduce the risk of accidental war. Our primary long-range interest in Geneva, however, is general and complete disarmament, designed to take place by stages, permitting parallel political developments to build the new institutions of peace, which would take the place of arms. The pursuit of disarmament has been an effort of this government since the 1920s. It has been urgently sought by the past 3 administrations. And however dim the prospects are today, we intend to continue this effort, to continue it in order that all countries, including our own, can better grasp what the problems and the possibilities of disarmament are. The only major area of these negotiations where the end is in sight, yet where a fresh start is badly needed, is in a treaty to outlaw nuclear tests. The conclusion of such a treaty, so near and yet so far, would check the spiraling arms race in one of its most dangerous areas. It would place the nuclear powers in a position to deal more effectively with one of the greatest hazards which man faces in 1963, the further spread of nuclear arms. It would increase our security. It would decrease the prospects of war. Surely this goal is sufficiently important to require our steady pursuit, yielding neither to the temptation to give up the whole effort, nor the temptation to give up our insistence on vital and responsible safeguards. I'm taking this opportunity, therefore, to announce 2 important decisions in this regard. First, Chairman Khrushchev, Prime Minister Macmillan, and I have agreed that high-level discussions will shortly begin in Moscow, looking towards early agreement on a comprehensive test ban treaty. Our hope must be tempered Our hopes must be tempered with the caution of history, but with our hopes go the hopes of all mankind. Second, to make clear our good faith and solemn convictions on this matter, I now declare that the United States does not propose to conduct nuclear tests in the atmosphere so long as other states do not do so. We will not be the first to resume. Such a declaration is no substitute for a formal binding treaty, but I hope it will help us achieve one. Nor would such a treaty be a substitute for disarmament, but I hope it will help us achieve it. Finally, my fellow Americans, let us examine our attitude towards peace and freedom here at home. The quality and spirit of our own society must justify and support our efforts abroad. We must show it in the dedication of our own lives, as many of you who are graduating today will have an opportunity to do by serving without pay in the Peace Corps abroad or in the proposed National Service Corps here at home. But wherever we are, we must all, in our daily lives, live up to the age-old faith that peace and freedom walk together. In too many of our cities today, the peace is not secure because freedom is incomplete. It is the responsibility of the executive branch at all levels of government, local, state, and national, to provide and protect that freedom for all of our citizens by all means within our authority. It is the responsibility of the legislative branch at all levels, wherever the authority is not now adequate, to make it adequate. And it is the responsibility of all citizens in all sections of this country to respect the rights of others and respect the law of the land. All this is not unrelated to world peace. When a man's way please the Lord, the scriptures tell us, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. And is not peace, in the last analysis, basically a matter of human rights? The right to live out our lives without fear of devastation, the right to breathe air as nature provided it, the right of future generations to a healthy existence. While we proceed to safeguard our national interests, let us also safeguard human interests. And the elimination of war and arms is clearly in the interests of both. No treaty, however much it may be to the advantage of all, however tightly it may be worded, can provide absolute security against the risks of deception and evasion. But it can, if it is sufficiently effective in its enforcement, and it is sufficiently in the interest of its signers, offer far more security and far fewer risks than an unabated, uncontrolled, unpredictable arms race. The United States, as the world knows, will never start a war. We do not want a war. We do not now expect a war. This generation of Americans has already had enough, more than enough, of war and hate and oppression. We shall be prepared if others wish it. We shall be alert to try to stop it. But we shall also do our part to build a world of peace where the weak are safe and the strong are just. We are not helpless before that task or hopeless of its success. Confident and unafraid, we must labor on, not towards a strategy of annihilation, but towards a strategy of peace.
Okay. Thank you again, all of you, for joining us. I want to say a few words of introduction about our speaker, who has done an amazing amount for peace in one lifetime. And for those of you who don't know her, I want to say a few words. Kathy Kelly is currently board president for World Beyond War. She has been repeatedly arrested for civil obedience to an authority that she considers higher than that of the U.S. government. This includes a term spent in prison for planting corn on top of a nuclear silo. She's been a war tax resistor for 40 years. She has defied U.S. economic sanctions against Iraq by bringing medicines to the people of Iraq many times. And she has put herself in harm's way by being in Iraq during the U.S. shock and awe bombing, and has lived with families in Gaza, Jenin, and Lebanon during U.S.-supported wars carried out by the State of Israel. We are really amazing and honored to have Kathy with us tonight, and I want to turn it over to her. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eli, for that introduction, and I very much also want to thank Steve for joining Marty and me to coordinate this technologically. And then a very special thank you to each of you who've taken time to join us this evening. I've been looking forward to this event. Like many of you, my thoughts about the speech we just listened to have been crucially affected by Jim Douglas's research and now by his remarkable book, A Martyrs to the Unspeakable, The Assassinations of JFK, Martin, Malcolm, and RFK. And I'm also grateful to Sam Husseini for drawing attention recently to two additional speeches John F. Kennedy made. But before I go on to that, I do want to say that the title for this talk really comes from Karl Mayer, who coined the idea, abolish war, listen to Earth. And I think we're, unmistakably at the cliff's edge. And so it requires for us to adopt the words of John F. Kennedy to our time, to our moment. It requires a great deal of resilience and careful thought. So, in one of the speeches that Sam Husseini pointed me to, the audience was the Parliament of Ireland. It was 18 days after John F. Kennedy gave the speech that we just listened to. And here's just a part of what he said to the people in Ireland. He said, the major forum for your nation's greater role in world affairs is that of protector of the weak and voice of the small. And John F. Kennedy really was trying to get the smaller nations in the United Nations to sort of pull the world powers possessing the nuclear weapons to be more sane. And so he said, from Cork to Congo, from Galway to the Gaza Strip, from this legislative assembly to the United Nations, Ireland is sending its most talented people to do the world's most important work, the work of peace. Now, I believe that work of peace has to be done without any weapons in the toolkit, disarmed. Now, a month before he was killed in Dallas, John F. Kennedy gave another speech that Sam Husseini had sent to me. And this was about the arts. It was on the occasion of the dedication of the Robert Frost Library at Amherst College. And again, this is just a part of his speech. If sometimes our great artists have been most critical of our society, it is because their sensitivity and their concern for justice makes them aware that our nation falls short of its highest potential. Marty encouraged me to use this time to talk about how John F. Kennedy's words have influenced me. And I want to be honest about how little I understood about John F. Kennedy growing up. I mean, the high school I went to was called St. Paul Kennedy High School. But I can't claim to have really understood very much. But I guess one door that was held open for me toward eventually learning more was a very simple presupposition. It's not okay to kill. Or again, if I could lean on a question entrusted to me by Karl Mayer, how can we learn to live together without killing one another? So at a very early stage in my life, I attended school at St. Paul Kennedy High School, and Brother Conrad was a beloved professor at the high school. And Brother Conrad had shown us a film which really shook me, in a sense, to the core. The film was called Night and Fog. And forgive me while I try to get to the beginning of this slideshow. Um, I'll just do this again. There we go. This was the film made by French artist historians, which uh, was haunted in a sense by the narration from a French uh, documentarian who pointed out that the blankets were created out of human hair, that lampshades were made from human skin. The crematoria spewed the ashes. And, again, at a pretty young age, I was wondering, didn't they smell the burning flesh? And so I had made this resolve. I will never be in the bleachers, on the sidelines, in the face of some unspeakable evil. But I have to confess to you, I went through the Vietnam War like Brigadoon in the mist. I didn't pick up the phone to call an elected representative. I didn't pass out a flyer. I certainly didn't become arrested, but the longing was there. And so later, much later, I learned about Hans and Sophie Scholl, these incredible siblings in Germany who had decided that even though they'd been part of Hitler Youth when they were young kids, they would listen to their father and they would no longer allow themselves to be silenced. And so they distributed thousands of leaflets as part of the White Rose Collective. You can see that white rose under Sophie's chin. Thousands of leaflets saying, "We will not be silent." And they risked their lives. Hans would be out in the middle of the night with red paint, painting slogans across Munich. And at one point, they were in their university in Munich. It was 1943. They'd been at this for a couple of years. And Sophie, maybe impetuously, pushed a big stack of flyers over the top floor banister of a large atria in the center of the university, and a custodian saw her do it. They were arrested, they were tried within days, and they were beheaded by the guillotine 3 days later. Now, their faces, their names, their collective, the White Rose, are still very well known and revered all throughout Europe. And I'm glad to know that the White Rose and Sophie and Hans Scholl are remembered. But what are we to say about the 240 young Palestinians who said, "We will not be silent," who wanted to give testimony about what they'd seen and heard, and they were gunned down by snipers. They were burned alive in their press tents. They were buried underneath the collapsing buildings as they were killed with no trial and all too few questions. And what are we to say about the medical people, the doctors, the nurses, the ambulance drivers, the EMT workers, who likewise have been persecuted and killed and assassinated as the genocide has gone on? And in many ways, people might say the world watched. Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, that's him in the white coat, walking toward the two tanks. And he's still in prison, and he's been tortured during this imprisonment. And he said, no, he would not give up on the Kamal Adwan Hospital and his duty to serve the patients there. And so I'm very pleased to see that people are still campaigning to free Dr. Abu Safia. This is the image that a very fine artist, David Solnit, created. You can see Dr. Safia walking toward the two tanks. And I think we also have to call for the freedom of Marwan Barghouti. Uh, he is somebody who is serving a sentence of 5 lifetimes in prison. Some say he could be a new Nelson Mandela. Maybe that's a hope we need to gamble on. But recently he was badly beaten in his prison cell, according to reports not entirely verified, but it sounds as though he suffered broken ribs, broken teeth. Part of his ear was cut off. So the liberation of all of us from this horrific genocide is, I believe, something we must keep on trying to focus our hopes for. And one thing JFK said is that peace is a process. It is a way of solving problems. So I think one path was recently suggested by Roger Cohen in the New York Times. And his path involved, over a pretty long stretch of time, seeking out the stories of people who lived near the border of Israel and Lebanon on either side of that border. And one of the people whom he sought out is Orna Weinberg. Orna's entire kibbutz was demolished in the attacks on October 7th that the Palestinians waged. A year after her grief and mourning, she said, you know what, I can't continue my life if I don't speak out against what Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing. And so I find that Orna's courage to speak up can be very indicative of a path for all of us. And similarly, I think we have the miracle in the Mediterranean. I mean, what this Simone flotilla represents is just remarkable. You see, the boats that managed to have nonviolence training overnight on each boat, they represent so many different countries. They were able to achieve consensus decision making. And it reminds me of JFK saying, genuine peace must be the product of many nations. He said it must be the sum of many acts. It must be dynamic, not static, changing to meet the challenge of each new generation. For peace is a process. It is a way of solving problems. And it requires also that we move ourselves away from demonizing. And that's not so easy. In fact, it's pretty gosh darn complicated. So I thought I would appeal to this cartoon, which I thought had been surely created by an American cartoonist. This is Yuli Ganf. In the Soviet magazine in the 1950s, the magazine was called Crocodile. And his caption for this cartoon is that at this American restaurant, only one patron is served. Well, the burly figure that's not quite looking like a human being hunched over all of the money, the currency coming to his table is the figure of war. Now, Yuli Ganf went on to say that the character closest to your left is actually slicing dollar bills. That's Harry Truman. Next to him, Winston Churchill with the British pounds, and then you have Mr. Ponnet coming in with the French francs, and then Konrad Adenauer in the background with the German marks. Well, we have to be careful not to demonize. I think let's think about rehabilitation, but also reparation. Now, when you look at the empty plates and that little guy back in the corner at the education table, there's a cobweb covering the globe, and the woman at the arts table sits in front of a broken cello, and the healthcare person's empty plate, he's looking pretty angry, and the sciences table is propped up with one leg, so it's got a book underneath it. And the image of Jesus in the temple, if you don't mind me appealing to a Christian image here, he goes in and turns the tables of the money chargers, of the thieves, of the people taking an illegal taxation away from poor people. What if the tables were turned? What if those people at each of those isolated tables got together? This is another graphic arts rendition from quite some time ago, created by a French artist, and you see the kind of predictable tiers of capitalism with the rulers and the educators, and then underneath them, the soldiers, and then the bourgeoisie, and who are on the bottom trying to hold it all up, but the suffering, persecuted, degraded, humiliated people. Well, what if they all stood up straight? And that's the kind of revolution I believe is really best occasioned by being willing to put to work something as a kid I learned about called the works of mercy as opposed to the works of war. And my friends, even this evening, trying to practice this speech, I looked over that works of war banner, and it's so truthful. What do the works of war do? Destroy the crops in the land, seize the food supplies, destroy homes, scatter families, contaminate water, imprison dissenters, inflict wounds and burns and kill the living. So who wouldn't want to embrace the works of mercy, have a heart open to the world and open to feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, give drink to the thirsty, visit the imprisoned, care for the sick, and bury the dead? So another practical way of achieving that is also suggested by JFK when he says in another speech that Marty put me onto, we have to be willing to stop seeking hegemony, to stop the imperialist effort, to let go of those desires, to let go of that falsely placed security. And I think that this slide, which was created by Peace News, which has now been closed down by kind of oppressive forces. But it's a slide that, well, at any rate, they're the ones that mediated it to others. I think it helps us back off of demonizing China. Not to say China isn't perfect, not to say China, uh, I'm sorry, isn't imperfect, not to say China isn't trying to take over other countries by making them so indebted to China that they'll never be able to pay back their loans. But look what China's surrounded by. It's almost as though there's this necklace of US bases. All those American flags are US bases. And then look at the mushroom clouds, the nuclear weapons so close to China's borders. And China has one military base. If you go to the Horn of Africa and Djibouti, this thumbnail-sized country, that's where China has a military base. Well, what has China been able to do with the money it didn't spend on militarism? And also, adapting to our time now, this generation now, there's a big possibility there could be another pandemic. We face the risk of ecological collapse. And so, why not learn how to collaborate with China and seek ways to get our minds out of that mindset that says we have to have an enemy? And so, I think about this artwork that was created by Tom Lewis when he was in prison for a Plowshares action. And it's made out of cocoa, used coffee grounds, and ashes. Well, you do what you can with what you can get your hands on. And he created this beautiful emblematic image of the sunflower, a sunflower in prison. And so out of the wreckage and the often, big temptation toward despair that we often feel now, what can be created? What can we look forward to that might be a better future in this season of Advent? A lot of the Christians think about the sprig of Jesse. It actually goes back to the Old Testament, growing out of a decayed and dying stump. Or in this artistic rendition, that sprig is seen juxtaposed with women who never were expected to become impregnated. Uh, there was a time when a group of us had gone to Iraq, and we we wanted so badly to try and stop the troops on the other side of what we felt was a false border in the first place. And that border was demarcated with barbed wire. And we got pretty close to the barbed wire within shouting distance of troops on the other side. And we held up pictures of some of the most beautiful children you could ever see. And we begged those troops, don't cross. You don't have to do this. Veterans for Peace, Charlie Litke, um, Jerry Zawada right there in the center. The troops invaded, but some of those very troops actually agreed with our banners. No occupation. Life is sacred. Courage for peace, not for war. So I want to take time to pause and think with you about January 6th, about the date when people were appalled at the marauding insurrectionists, the almost barbaric looking, violent, alienating people who broke into the halls of US government. And President Joe Biden shortly thereafter said on national TV, "This is not who we are." And I thought, oh, yes, it is. This is who we are. If we look at the continent of Africa, carved, divided up into 56 different countries, and the invaders, European and American invaders who kidnapped, enslaved, exploited, stole, divided, carved the continent into different states to serve even more oppressive masters. And this continues through the IMF and through the World Bank and through indebtedness to other countries, which, granted, China also pursues. And what is the truthful response to people in Africa and Central America and Afghanistan and Iraq? We should be making reparations. This is what a civilized country would do. And why would we want to be state-centric at this point? And I would say that to people in both Gaza and the West Bank as well. Don't sell your hopes out to being part of a two-state solution. What about a collective homeland that's not state-centric? I look to Africa, where countries are pushing for a resurgence of Pan-Africanism and saying Africa is the future. And I hope that's true. I love that Ubuntu. I am you, you are me. Barbara Deming said it. We are all part of one another. And so John F. Kennedy also said it. He said, let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and to the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal. So there's little Sakina with her yellow-handled hammer, and she's beating plastic guns into smithereens because these kids, these Afghan child laborers, kids who froze out in the cold all winter, kids who, could be lured into human trafficking, kids whose futures didn't look very bright. These kids said, we want to bury the guns. And they covered over their grave of guns and planted trees. And I think they're the inheritors, the prophets and the inheritors of these words etched across from the United Nations, from the book of Isaiah, arcing all the way into our present. Beat the swords into plowshares, the spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift the sword against nation, neither shall they continue to learn the ways of war any longer. And so I thank you, all of you, for listening to this. And Steve, thank you for closing us out for my part of the presentation with the words of Joan Baez. Well, let me say, with the words of the Civil Rights Anthem sung in that incredibly crystal clear voice of Joan Baez. Thank you, Steve.
Would you sing "We Shall Overcome" with me, please? We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we
Thank you. Marty, back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Before we turn to the questions, I just wanted to mention a couple things. Everyone will be who registered tonight will be receiving a recording of this event, along with a recording of the JFK speech that they can use. It's one of the hopes of the JFK committee that the public becomes more aware of this speech. So one of the things we can do is invite people into our homes to watch it and discuss it, or see if a local library or church would like to have a showing of the film. So I just encourage people to think about that. Someone once said to me that the difference between doing something and doing nothing is everything. So I try and keep that in mind. One other thing I want to mention is that next month we're going to have Ray McGovern as our commentator. He's a former officer of the Central Intelligence Agency, the intelligence branch, not the operations branch. And he's a co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, and is also a great peace activist. So with that, if people have comments or questions they want to raise, I don't see anything in the chat at the moment, but if people wanted to raise their hands and make a comment or ask a question, there at the bottom of your screen is should be, and let's see.
Marty, I see Moji has his hand raised, and
Okay.
Carl has his hand raised.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Okay. Moji, you want to unmute yourself and
Yeah. Hi, thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you so much for this program and for the words of JFK 6 months before he was killed by people who, although we know the cover story, but we know that he was killed by people whose interests he was threatening, the military-industrial complex. So thank you, and I want to invoke the banality of evil or normalization of evil that the Holocaust survivor philosopher Hannah Arendt invoked. And Kathy, and I want to see your thoughts, to see, I'm from Iran, as you know, and I'm a peace activist, human rights activist, Mother Earth activist, and social justice activist. And to what extent do you think that the savagery has been normalized? And that could be the root of by our, I mean humanity. I am from the global south, suffering from the savagery of the global north. And to what extent do you think that we have gone down the road of normalization of evil, as Hannah Arendt pointed out? Thank you.
Thank you, Moji. When President Kennedy said the United States will never start a war, we all had to cringe, I think, because in the forever wars of recent history, in so many United States interventions in other parts of the world, the United States started savage wars. And you are right, Moji, to use the word savage. And when I tried to use that image of the people bursting into the halls of governance and looking, so alienating. And, I'm thinking, well, we need to look in the mirror. We need to see what our people in our time, in our history, have done to make life miserable for other people. So I do believe that it's helpful to hear President Kennedy, kind of trying to almost walk a tightrope, I think, uh, because he's dealing with some of those very savage people within the military, within the CIA. Uh, but I think that on balance, he was trying to pull people toward a way of survival. And right now, I think we have to take so seriously the fact that, as you mentioned, being part of humanity, of the earth, that we're all part of a humanity facing a potential ecological collapse.
Thank you. I might say one other thing about the speech. For me, he is articulating principles of peace and peace as a process. And they're principles which are really eternal. And so they relate to today. And he says we have to find ways of, shifting and applying ourselves in different ways at different times. But I think the principles that he's articulating are extremely relevant in terms of really understanding what genuine peace process is. Any other thoughts people have about the speech?
Marty, Carl had, yeah.
You have your hand up, Carl. You want to unmute yourself?
Carl, you're mute.
You have to unmute.
Carl, unmute yourself.
At the bottom left, you have to make your microphone work, Carl.
There you go.
Oh, there. Okay. Well, Kathy, you give very inspiring speeches that several times brought me to tears. But I am always hoping that you will list or speak about the concrete actions that each one of us can do that lie within our own power and within our own hands. And as you know, one of those things that most of us in the peace movement participate in the payment of federal income taxes, of which about 50% go to past, present, and future costs of war. And what the one concrete thing we can do toward the abolition of war that is really in our own hands is non-payment of taxes, which you and I have been doing for many, many years. And the educational things, and I had hoped, seeing the title, that you might also go more to the question of listen to Earth, that we have to try to end the present Cold War that is totally fueled by money that American corporations are making on weapons and war. And so, but this is a double Cold War with China and and Russia at the same time. It's a war that the United States has zero hope of prevailing in. So you do tremendous educational work, much more than I've been effective in doing, but we have to go back to the vision of people like Mohandas Gandhi and Peter Marn, the ideological energy in his influence on Dorothy Day and the Catholic worker movement. So communitarian movements, cultivating the land. The two big threats are still the threat of nuclear war and this immense problem of climate change in which we have to cooperate with all the great powers and the small powers because it's at the present time one of the two biggest threats to humanity. So
Thank you.
I do what I think I can do, but
Kathy, did you want to respond?
Well, I think, Carl, you've done a great deal, more than what you think you can do. There's a whole generation of us who became educated as activists, listening to you as well as listening to Earth. But thank you for that. And Alice, it'll be great to hear from you.
Hi, I really appreciate your remarks, Kathy, and I'm thrilled to work with you on World Beyond War. And I hope everybody joins World Beyond War because they've got the right idea. It's not this war or that weapon, it's war. The other thing, when I listen to John F. Kennedy's speech and how he talks about Russia, that they're human beings and they love their children just like we love our children, no matter. There is so much awful stuff going on in what Ray McGovern calls the Mickey Mat, which is in America, the military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academic think tank complex. We're so brainwashed that we don't really hear or see what's coming at us, the opportunities coming from Russia and China. They just gave a huge speech on the 80th anniversary of World War II, how we have to cooperate, that the earth, with the environment and with war is taking us away. And they pledged never to be the first to put weapons in space. Did you read this on the front page of the New York Times, the Washington? They gave a pledge in their speech. They reminded everybody how they've been begging us to negotiate for years to keep weapons out of space. And right now, so much of our money is going into this goddamn golden dome. That's GDGD, goddamn golden dome. And that's where we're going to dominate and control space. But the negotiations between Reagan and Gorbachev broke up because Gorbachev said, let's get rid of our nuclear weapons. And Reagan said, yeah, great idea. Gorbachev said, don't do Star Wars. Reagan said, I can't give up Star Wars. And right now, it's right on the table. I put it, I don't know how to do it in the chat, but I'll send it to Eli or to the list. Read the speech that Russia and China gave on the 80th anniversary and all their pleas for global cooperation, for fixing the climate, for keeping weapons out of space so that we could move. And they're asking for cooperation, and nobody knows it in this country. It's totally off the table. So I'm putting it back on. Thanks.
Well, Alice, if you send me that speech, and I can include it in our follow-up email.
I will. I'll send it to you. And I wrote an article about it to make it a little easier, but I'll send you both.
Susan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to address the something that hasn't been discussed, as far as I know, enough. Generations. I mean, here we are. I think we're all pretty much boomers, and we kind of get dismissed as being passé. That's ancient history, blah, 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 when we get into peace activism. So I want to see what is being done. I want Kathy to address what's being done to reach out to the youth of America, because that's our future.
Thank you, Susan. I think we still need to say to ourselves, follow the young people. And here in this country, but also in countries all around the world, young people 2 years ago took action. They got into tents, they displaced themselves, they put nonviolent guidelines to work, they campaigned to stop a genocide. They wanted to know just how much money was going to all of the merchants of death and to, what portion of the hedge funds that their universities had collected were going into paying for weapons manufactured by Boeing and Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. They tried and they were persecuted, they were squelched, but I don't believe they've been silenced. So I think we should keep on listening to young people, encouraging young people, and calling on other boomers who might be, tenured professors or have some kind of a stake in academia, not just in the United States, all around the world, to start listening up to young people. I think, again, I take a look at Africa. Pan-Africanism is resurgent. And in many African countries, there are young people saying, we've had it up to here with the more wealthy nations stealing our wealth and extracting our resources, and we're going to pursue something different. So I think we might be wondering, well, where is the youth leadership? Greta Thunberg, what more could we ask for? Um, so I think it's a good idea to celebrate those young people who are trying. And again, I'm glad Alice called attention to World Beyond War, because there are young people in chapters all throughout Latin America, Africa, who are doing their best to push toward realizing the goals that are, part and parcel of their survival, really.
Thank you.
I see Rosalie's hand is up.
I think we had another. Jackie's hand was up first. Let's go
Oh,
with Jackie.
sorry.
That's okay. Jackie and then Rosalie.
Let's duke it out, Rosie.
Oh,
I just quickly wanted to say, hi, Kathy. Good to see you, dear. When you're talking about the youth, here in Portland, Maine, the elementary school kids walked out of school and marched to the town hall around the ice, what was going on with ice. We've got an awful lot of immigrants here in Portland, and a lot of them have been taken. And it is just so heartening to see the young people. I think our future is with the youth, and they are awakened. They are awakened.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think that there have also been some soft boycotts going on amongst young people who are saying, we're not going to buy from Target any longer. We're done with Trader Joe's. Applaud what's there. I see Phyllis clapping there. Thanks, Phyllis.
And Rosalie was next.
thank you. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. These are such terribly, terribly frightening times, and so discouraging for those of us in the peace movement who feel kind of invisible a lot of the time, I think. But I do want to put in a word about the shift that I think we all feel coming our way, which has to do with listening to Earth. I think that the environmental movement has an awful lot more supporters than the peace movement, because I think it's easier for them to be for the Earth. But I think the connections between militarism and environmentalism are getting more and more attention, of connecting the dots. But I do feel that we begin to see that we really love this Earth, and that we won't tolerate anything that isn't sustainable, that we might prefer to pledge our allegiance to the Earth flag than to the flag of a nation state. And I just want to say that I think if we could find a way for our voices to get into the mainstream, it would be a good thing. But if we can get others to hear some of the independent journalists, that will also be a good thing. So thank you to all of you who care so much and have done so much.
Leslie, thank you. I would also like to mention permaculture for peace has really been emphasizing the peace part. I've been so edified by how much permaculturists have helped to resettle refugees who certainly deserve reparation because of what's been done to them in Afghanistan. Helped to resettle, close to 100 people. And in Australia, these activists who just shut down the coal port waterway access, 8,000 people that were part of a movement called Rising Tides, and loads of young people involved. So I think globally, we might see others that we didn't expect, kind of coming around the corner. And I thank you, Rosalie. But I see Walt's got his hand up also.
Thank you. It was good to see you, Kathy, at the anniversary of the Peace Pagoda in October. I'm on the internet with this name, Walt Waldo Walden, but otherwise, I'm Arthur Burton. Anyway, not seeing young people in this meeting, for example, I wanted to ask, is there some communication going on between young peace activists in the US and Russia now? Because I was connected with many friends there through the internet. I've been there all the way across Russia, and there was a women's peace group in all the way in Novosibirsk. And when this war started in Ukraine, I think they don't have the possibility to communicate anymore with the West. There is a restriction there in Russia. In Ukraine, I think it's somewhat better. So if there is some way we can try to bring communication again between especially young people in the two countries, that's what I wanted to ask.
Okay. Nydia, you have your hand up.
Yes, just a couple of things. I wanted to comment that today, December 7th, is also Pearl Harbor Day. It's a day that I remember quite vividly. But I won't go into that. It's just that it was called a day that would live in infamy. I just wanted to say that. I also wanted to thank Kathy just for her very presence. There's something about Kathy when she speaks that conveys a sense of such integrity and strength, even though I know Kathy and she's not very tall. She is a petite dynamo, and that she is the head of World Beyond War. We must all support World Beyond War. Alice Slater also serves on the board. So many good people. We are lucky that we have the internet. It hasn't been taken away from us, even though it might be at some point. I want all of us who are here on this day of December 7th, if you're not yet supporting World Beyond War by being on their listserv, getting their messages, reading the material they send out, I would urge you to do that. And just want to thank Kathy for who she is.
Thank you, Nydia. And thank you for urging support for World Beyond War. David Swanson will be really, really happy to know that you were so strong in saying that, because I sometimes forget. But I don't want to lose that question about maintaining contact with young people in Russia. Uh, and truthfully, uh, you know, John Ruhr, who is the treasurer for World Beyond War, had a weekly phone call trying to protect the Zaporizhia nuclear weapons plant. And we sort of started to think, well, maybe we'll make some inroads into reaching young people in Russia, but we didn't get very far, to be honest. So uh, if others have ideas about how that can be accomplished, I don't want to underestimate how important that is. Carl walked across the United States and across much of Europe and into what was once the Soviet Union, believing that it would be possible to make those kinds of communications. But we also can't be naive about how difficult it can be as well. Muji, I hope you won't mind that we see a new hand that's been raised, John German.
I have an idea of how to help establish those contacts.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. What I do from here in Boulder, Colorado, is have every other week bilingual, binational simulcast between the Clubhouse application for people inside Iran and for Zoom with Zoom. And I simply hold the cell phone next to the microphone of the Zoom so people can inside Iran, including the inside Iran director or the inside Iran person who is in charge of the peace-seeking Iranian veterans, of which I am a co-founder in the United States. So people inside Iran can hear people in the United States and vice versa. And so there are creative ways of trying to overcome the kind of restrictions that repressive governments put on freedom of information.
Thank
I'd be
you,
more than
Muji.
happy to help. And I sent some links and including my contact information in the chat.
Thank you. I had noticed that John German's hand had gone up, but I also see Rosalie's hand is up. John, are you there?
Yes, thank you. There are two quick things. One, in the Rotary intercountry committees, of which there are more than 400, one of them that I am in is the USA-Russia intercountry committee. We meet every 2 weeks on Zoom and have discussions about the projects that Rotarians in Russia are doing, and people support them. We've also been sending money to support their projects when people are moved to do that. And the basis on which this is happening is that the discussions are about what the clubs are doing and the projects that they have that they're proud of, they want us to know about, the ones that need support. That's the scope of the discussions. It's not about the geopolitical situation at all. And aside from that, in other organizations that I'm in, that had many very influential people in Russia routinely in meetings for years. Those have all, as far as I know, stopped because of the perceived risk to those people in Russia of having some retribution for something that they would do. So I don't see those happening there. Last comment is that in meetings that we have every 2 weeks, in another group with Ukraine, where I had tried to get the Rotaractors, the college age Rotarians, that were communicating Ukraine to Russia in the same meetings, to get those going again. And what I was met with was the reaction from the Ukrainian side, which is the only one we could talk to, that basically they were so traumatized by their situation, they just couldn't wrap their heads around the idea of getting in touch with Russia again at this point. So the idea was a wonderful idea, but it's just too early. They're going to be conditions precedent that have to happen, which is what we're all working on before those things will be possible. So a few thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Rosalie. Rosalie, you're muted.
Thank you, Kathy. High schools are my favorite place, and I'm grateful to John for the idea of Rotary clubs. I think everybody has Rotary clubs, and maybe they have some international ones. I think kids in our high schools would love to be in touch with young people in Iran or any of the listed countries that we're very unkind to. So that just was all I wanted to say, was if we had a place to start the search, which might be Rotary, and there may be many other groups that people would let me know about, to put our high school students in touch in that way. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to again thank Marty for keeping this speech of John F. Kennedy's alive. You're right. It's good to just keep hearing it again and again. And thank you for inviting me to be with you tonight. It's been a real privilege to be in the same Zoom presence of all of you. Thank you.
Okay, we do have to stop in a couple minutes, but there was someone who had their hand up just now. Oh,
Michael Brackney had his hand up.
Michael, why don't you go ahead? You have to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you. I was able to join this webinar only at the beginning of the Q&A because I'm the president of the board of the Peace Resource Center in San Diego, and I was working to get young people into our collaborating with our organization, so I can at least contribute that. But I wanted to echo something that Marty said earlier about how it's difficult when we hear John Kennedy say that the United States will never start a war. There's something else in the speech that troubles me too, similarly, and that is when he says, in direct contradiction to the way Jesus put it, we don't actually have to love our neighbors. He doesn't put it quite that way, but it's pretty similar. And I think we could unnecessarily turn off too many people with that comment, because taking love in a very, very inclusive way, I think we do need to love our neighbors. And so that comment of Kennedy's troubles me every time it comes up. And I wonder, Kathy, if you can tell me what your reaction to my being troubled by that might be.
Well, thank you, Michael. I think that was me who suggested that it was wrongful to say that the United States has never started a war.
Oh, you, okay.
Yeah. The idea of asking ourselves earnestly, how can we learn to live together without killing one another, I think automatically presumes that we have to try to figure out ways to love our neighbors. It's interesting that Kennedy says people and families don't always get along together.
Yes. Yes.
So maybe I think that, especially as I have tried to listen to three other speeches that Kennedy gave. One to the Parliament of Ireland and it's not 100% anti-war, but boy, he comes out strongly in favor of saying the most important pursuit you can go after is peacemaking. And then the second to the University of Amherst, when they installed a Robert Frost commemoration building. And then a third one that I know Eli and Marty will be more than happy to send along, and that's a speech that Kennedy gave before the Senate countering imperialism. You don't get, a 100% undeviating endorsement of ideals that we would like to see, to be honest. But what Marty said is that the principles are there, and those can evolve, those can be
Yeah.
further developed.
I would also say that I think Kennedy was using the word love in a very narrow term in terms of emotional feeling about a person. But actually, to be able to resolve disputes in a peaceful manner is a form of love, from my point of view. It's an active form of love. And so I don't really have a problem with what he was saying in that situation. But
Well, Marty, I want to say I agree with everything you said there emphatically. It's just, I think it's confusing to use his use of love is confusing to me because it's not clear. Well, I guess it is clear what he means by it, but I would just like us. I think that in order for us to save this world, we do have to learn to love one another, and I think that we need to emphasize that. And it just it's just hard for me every time I hear that.
well, maybe we'll have another showing of the film and we'll focus on love and
Sure.
implications of the speech for our understanding of love.
There we go. And
one thing I want to say, American people should find and read the letter of Tolstoy that was asked by Quaker family. The lady was one of his best translators. In that letter, he says that the American people should listen to those great thinkers, the transcendentalists of that time, his time, 19th century, not of millionaires or politicians or presidents. They're not the real people that have the vision for life and also the Gandhian understanding that everyone is a neighbor that is on this planet.
Well, thank you. And thank everyone for joining us tonight. We're going to conclude and you'll be hearing from us and we hope to hear back from you. And Kathy, again, really appreciate everything you're doing. Take care.
Good night now.